Please share where you're watching from and consider subscribing to the channel. I grew up in a little hollow at the end of a dirt road that turned to soup whenever it rained, with the forest pressing right up against our back steps like it wanted to come inside and warm its hands by the stove. My mother left when I was 4. My father's name wasn't on any paper a person could hold up to the light, and so it was Grandma and Grandpa who kept me fed and loved and inside after dark. Grandpa had lungs like wet paper from the mines and hands that remembered a pick even after the pick was gone. Grandma canned everything that would sit still: green beans, peaches, soup beans with a little ham, lined up on their shelves like jewels. We did fine, because in the holler fine means you're breathing and the roof don't drip on your bed. Grandpa told stories when the night came down early, when the wind found every seam in the house and whistled mean. He had a dozen favorites: Cherokee warnings, old feuds that started over a pig and outlived every man who ever swung a fist. But the one he always saved for last was the Appalachian howler. "Older 'en these hills," he'd say, voice going low like church, "and it'll be here long after we're gone. Bigger 'en a bear, meaner 'en a wolf, and smart as sin." He'd describe the way its howl wrung the night out like a wet rag. "You'll know it when you hear it. And you listen to me now, Samantha. Long as it's howlin', you're safe. If it goes quiet, it's found you." He'd always pause there, eyes on mine to make sure the words stuck. They did. We lived careful anyway, locks checked, curtains pulled, woodbox full, but on new moon nights my grandparents got particular. Grandma would say, "Ain't no sense taking chances," the way some folks say blessing over food. I thought it was just their way until the October I turned 8. The wind had finally gotten teeth, and I was still awake, chasing shadows on the ceiling with my eyes when I heard it. It started low, like wind stuck in a broken chimney, then rose up and thinned out until it sounded like a scream pulled through a comb. I knew coyote and fox and bobcat. This wasn't those. I was out of bed and across the hall before my feet knew they were moving. Grandma caught me up and said, "Hush now," but her arms were tight. Grandpa was at the window with the curtain pinched in 2 fingers, the old double barrel he never hunted with leaning against the wall. We spent the night in their room. Grandma read to me, and then pretended she wasn't counting under her breath every time the howl slid nearer. Sometimes it sounded like it was pacing the porch. Sometimes it leapt to the ridge and fell back like a bucket down a well. It never stopped. Not until the sky went the soft gray of dishwater and the roosters down the hollow remembered themselves. In the morning, Grandma made pancakes like it was my birthday, and when I asked, she said, "Some things ain't for day talk." I kept track of the moon after that. When you live out where the dark is whole, knowing when it'll be darkest is just sense. By 13 I was between sizes, too big to be little, too little to be big, and I had a friend from town named Tammy who loved our place because it made her feel brave. We'd spend all afternoon stepping stones across the creek and arguing about whether Dylan from math class was a heartthrob or just had good hair. When the light dropped and the trees went from green to cutouts, I said we ought to go. Tammy rolled her eyes. "Sun's still up," she said. "Barely," I said. "Grandma's gonna worry." We were halfway home when the first howl spilled through the trunks. It raked a nail down my spine. "Mountain lion," Tammy said like she'd seen 3. The second call came closer, choked and broken and weirdly patterned, like language you almost understand. I felt stupid for being scared and scared for feeling stupid. "We should run," I said. "It's fine," she said. Then the howling stopped. The silence hit like a door shutting. "Run," I said, and this time she didn't argue. Something heavy landed behind us with a thud I felt in my teeth. We broke out of the trees into the edge of the yard, and Grandma was already there, braced under the porch light with Grandpa's shotgun. The report cracked the air, bark leapt from a maple, and whatever had been breathing close enough to find my hair stepped back. "House now," Grandma shouted, and we went. She barred the door with her whole body and hands that shook. We drank hot chocolate in her bedroom with the curtains taped down, and the Yahtzee cup clacking like we could rattle luck into the house. "Your grandpa wasn't just tellin' tales," she said quiet. "I seen it once when I was your age. I seen it again tonight." I asked what it looked like and she said, "Wrong," and left it there. That was the night the rule came down. Inside by 4 on new moon days, no exceptions, not for me, not for any friend who came calling. I didn't push back. Some rules are just fences that keep things out. Time took me out of the hollow anyway. I got a job in the city, real coffee, buses, people who didn't know my last name or what it meant. And I got good at pretending the woods behind our house were just woods and not a second pair of eyes. But I still checked a moon calendar before I booked a train back home, and every time my tires rolled onto that dirt road and the forest leaned in to smell who I'd brought, I watched the tree lean. Old habits don't die. They set up a chair on your porch and wait. When I finally brought a boyfriend home, I did it on purpose and by accident. Marcus was a good man from a place with straight streets, a software job that made as little sense to my grandma as coal futures do to me, and a patient way of listening when I didn't know how to say the hurt things. We picked a weekend because it was when he could get off. I didn't check the moon until I was halfway there, and my stomach dropped. New. Turn back? Marcus said, easy. He would have. No, I lied. It's fine. And then honest. We just gotta be inside early. Grandma hugged him and fed him and looked at me like I'd brought home a stray dog with good eyes. Y'all best get inside for 4, she told us after lunch. Ain't no sense tempting it. Marcus grinned like he thought she meant rain. I pulled him onto the porch swing and explained in the softest way I could manage. He nodded and didn't laugh. That was part of why I'd brought him. Evening laid itself down gentle. Crickets, a jar candle, Grandma's wind chimes telling the same old gossip, and Marcus told me a dumb story about getting locked out of his office barefoot. He reached for my hand, and I let him. That was a new thing for me, the letting. The phone on the porch table buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again, the exact 3-note chirp Dylan used to have on his flip phone a lifetime ago, a sound I should not have heard in 2023. I turned it face up. No notification. No service. Buzz. Buzz buzz. The sound came again from the dark garden. Same rhythm. Then the chimes went still. Grandma slid the deadbolt on the front door and said from the kitchen, too calm, inside. We went. She locked the back door. She checked the windows and laid a nail across each sill like she was playing some quiet game I didn't know the rules of. Long as it howls, you're safe, she reminded me, as if I could ever forget. If it stops. I know, I said, and I did, but I didn't know what to do with my heart still tumbling from that porch swing to the floor. At full dark the sound came, ragged and wrong, going up and down like someone was working a saw through wet wood. It circled the house. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't ask to look. The old dog next door, a stray that had decided on our yard years back, crept under the propane tank and whined with his whole body. We kept ourselves busy. Grandma dealt Yahtzee and pretended not to flinch when the howl leaned against the kitchen wall. Marcus asked Grandpa questions from the pictures on the mantel like he'd known him. He looks kind, he said. I said, and because the night was pressing against my teeth, I told Marcus about the first time I'd heard it, and the shot that split bark at 13, and how some days I run before people can set a plate down for me, because leaving first is easier than being left. He didn't try to fix it. He just reached over and tapped the scorecard. Yahtzee, he said, and shook the cup again. The howling stopped. It was like a plug pulled out of the night. Silence came in a rush. I felt it lay its hand on the back of my neck. From the porch, footsteps. Slow. Too heavy for Fox. Too careful for Bear. And then the front door knocked, polite as a neighbor. Sam. Marcus's voice asked from outside. Hey, can you let me in? Lock myself out. Marcus was sitting right beside me, bones warm through his flannel. He looked at me. I looked at him. The knock came again. The handle jiggled once, twice, like someone who didn't want to make a fuss. My phone buzzed on the table. The screen read, MOM. But when I swiped, the only thing that slid into my ear was my own voice, saying my name the way my mother used to when I'd scraped my knees. Samantha. Honey. Grandma lifted the shotgun and planted herself by the door like a tree grown there. Not tonight, she told the wood. Ain't no supper for you here. The thing on the porch breathed through the crack where the weather stripping fails. It smelled like pennies and creek mud. My phone dimmed. The dog under the tank crawled further under and made a sound like it was trying to cry without making noise. Marcus whispered, What do you want me to do? Stay, I said. I surprised myself. I meant it 2 ways. We waited. The silence had weight, but we had walls and rules and a woman with a nail for every window. The breathing moved to the kitchen door, then the bedroom window, then the back steps, testing, circling, jealous as a person who's decided they deserve what you've got just because they can reach it. Something dragged a claw down the vinyl siding with the patience of a cat sharpening. I pictured it wearing my boyfriend's voice like a coat it hadn't earned. Sometime near dawn the crickets tiptoed back in. The dog unclenched. The first tuck of birdsong landed on the fence. We opened nothing until the light was full and rude. When we did, the porch boards were scored in 3s. Marcus's knit cap was gone from the swing. Later we found it in the garden with a string of hair caught in the ribbing, like someone had tried it on to see if it felt like belonging. We left before dusk that day. Marcus didn't make jokes in the car. He held my hand on the gravel, and when the tires hit pavement, we exhaled together like we'd both been holding our breath for years. I still don't know what I believe, except this: some things are older than your wanting, and cannot stand to see you loved. I still check moon phases. I still watch the trillion. And for the first time, I didn't run. We started hunting together the year after we got married, 2010, when money was tight, but the mountains were free. Folks in the city think of date nights as candles and reservations. For us it was thermoses and blaze orange, quiet hours in a blind where we could hear each other breathe and remember we were on the same team. Every November we rented Earl's old place near Massanutten. Earl was the sort of man who could fix a carburetor with a pocket knife and prayer. He liked us, said we were good mountain broke kids, and he charged next to nothing so long as we brought back jerky. We had more normal years than not. Some seasons we tagged out, some we didn't. But in 2014, the woods went wrong. We were 3 hours into a new spot, 2 miles north of where we usually sat. Dawn had flared and cooled. Birds were doing their housekeeping. Then the air tightened, the way it does right before a thunderhead rolls, only there wasn't a cloud in the sky. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in a breath. My wife glanced at me, and I could see the hair lift along her neck, even under the collar. "You feel that?" she whispered. "Yeah." I didn't want her to hear my teeth click. Then the sound came, high and awful, like a brake rotor screaming, metal rubbing metal, not made for these trees but shoved through them anyway. It bounced off the ridges until you couldn't point to where it started. We both looked to the north ridge and saw something stride the skyline. 2 legs, upright, moving too quick for that steep. Wings tucked, then half opened, a leathery unfurl that seemed too wide for the gap between oaks. In the pale light, I thought I saw a beak catch the sun and throw it back cold. We didn't run. You don't run unless you have to. We packed up quiet and got, boots careful on leaves that suddenly sounded like tin foil. All the way back, that metal-on-metal screech circled us, here then there, like it was testing the way a sound could frighten. Earl stopped by that evening with a load of oak he just happened to be split in anyway. When my wife, trying to be casual, mentioned the ridge and the noise, he went still like a rabbit. "Y'all hush now," he said low. "Something ain't right up that way. Old folks round here call it the Snallygaster. Don't be going there dawn nor dusk. Hear me?" He wasn't telling a camp story. He was giving directions the way you tell a kid to look both ways. We avoided that piece of woods after. Life filled in around it, jobs and traffic and the slow ache of 2 people rubbing the city's edges off each other. I wanted a kid. She wasn't ready. We shelved the talk, then took it back down again, then shelved it. Hunting week stayed our truce. We put the topic in the glove box with the maps and let the mountains hold us. 2019, last morning of the trip, fog thick as milk. We were in a blind east of the cabin, a reliable spot. 50 yards of sight if that. The world felt close and wet. Something rustled in the thicket at 40 yards. I brought the rifle half up, thinking doe. What stepped out wasn't any deer God made. It came low and slow, bear-sized through the chest but wrong in the corners. For legs jointed backward, a neck that seemed hinged too many times. Where the head should have been soft, there was a hard angle that caught the thin light like metal. Not chrome, old machine metal, pitted and dark. From the shoulders uncurled 6 tendrils, tentacles, moving independent, tasting the fog. My wife's breath snagged next to me. We became the inside of statues. It scanned the ground like it had lost something, made that same metal grinding sound we'd heard 5 years back, only softer, like talking to itself. Then it lifted that head and turned toward us. I swear it couldn't see us. We were tucked in downwind. But it felt us. You know when you're being looked at. You can feel it at the root. My wife eased her phone up slow as a sunrise. The movement was nothing, a tremor in the fog. The thing reared to full height, 8 feet, maybe more, and flared those wings. Not feathers, leather, ribbed like something engineered, not grown. It screamed, and my molars hummed. Then it lunged, not at us but past us, gliding side-on into the white, gone in 2 heartbeats, the air behind it punched empty. We sat 10 minutes by my watch, 5 hours by my bones. We left early that day without Earl's firewood goodbye. On the way home, the name he'd said rolled around in the cab. Snallygaster. We looked it up that night. The old clippings and stranger forum posts all sang the same tune. Leathery wings, tentacles, a beak sometimes called metal, a scream like steel, a habit of circling. It's one thing to read a story. It's another to have your memory gnawed at every line. That should be where it ends. But things that don't much favor people don't always quit after a clean scare. The next year we talked friends of ours, Ray and June, into a couple's camp, one night only, close to the cabin. We'll keep it easy, I promised. I told myself we'd chosen a safe spot. We brought an extra cooler and 2 decks of cards, and the sort of cheer you pack when you're selling normal. The fog came early, a ground hugger. Earl stopped by before dusk, glanced at the sky, and said, "Y'all hush now. Something ain't right." He didn't smile. We zipped the tents just after 9. My wife and I lay on our backs listening to Ray's snore start and stall. We whispered. The old fight slipped in. The kid talk, not mean but thin-edged from being handled too much. In the middle of it, something tapped the tent pole. A precise, hollow tap. Then another, like a beak testing aluminum. "You hear that?" she breathed. Tap. Tap tap. The rhythm of a text buzz. At the same moment, her phone lit in the dark with a message from a number she didn't know. The screen showed 3 dots pulsing like the sender was typing. Another tap at the pole matched those dots perfectly. My belt buckle went cold against my stomach like it had been left on a windowsill in winter. The air filled with the smell of hot iron, rail yard, and pennies held too long. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. The tapping slid down the pole, along the guy line, paused where the stake met dirt. Outside, something's breath fogged the nylon. You could see it bloom and fade, though the night wasn't that cold. The tendrils, don't ask me how I knew, made a faint rubbing sound against the fabric, as if they were braiding air. In the other tent, June's phone pinged. Then again. She whispered a curse. Ray mumbled back. Their tent zipper inched like a toothache. "Don't," I hissed, loud enough for them to freeze. A pale shape drifted by our vestibule. No weight, just the idea of something passing. There came a soft clack by my wife's hand, metal on metal, curious, deliberate, the nose of something tapping her ring. I felt the tent lighten, stupid thought, like attention was a weight you could measure. The zipper head twitched. One of those tendrils slipped in through the gap the size of a thumbnail and touched her finger like a cold wire. She slid her hand back slow. I covered it with mine. The thing outside paused. Then the tent wall dimpled near our faces, the imprint of a beak pressing gentle as a kiss, then firmer, then gone. Footsteps. No, not footsteps, but the suggestion of pressed clay moved away. In the morning, grooves like talons lined the damp earth in tidy arcs around both tents. My wife's ring was still on her finger, but the gold had a new hairline scratch across the inside band, a tiny scored half moon that hadn't been there the night before. I grew up in a small house shouldered up against the woods in eastern Kentucky. Inside, my parents' voices scraped at each other most nights, money, schedules, who forgot what. I didn't have words like resentment or exhaustion, just the way sound travels under a bedroom door and puddles under your bed. Dad worked at a dealership, not the sales side, the wrench side. Mom did shifts at Dollar General, and came home with receipt tape still stuck to her wrist. I tried to make myself smaller, to take up less sound. One fall night when I was 5, dry leaves ticked at my window. Something tapped my shoulder like an impatient finger, and I woke straight up. The figure beside my bed looked like my mom in the way shadows look like the thing that threw them. Same height, hair, that long white nightgown she wore, the one snagged at the hem where the dryer caught it once. She didn't speak. She curled her finger at me, "Come on." My window was cracked open halfway. That was wrong. Those old sash windows held shut like they were afraid to let go. But there it was, open to the night air that smelled like wet pennies and damp bark. The figure leaned out, then back, coaxing. I climbed. The sill bit my palms. The air made my teeth hurt. That's the last clear thing. Morning found me in the flower bed under my window, curled like a dropped glove, dew in my hair, little scratches on my face from the holly. Mom and Dad argued in whispers over top of me like smoke. "How'd he?" "Windows nailed now," Dad said after, and he did, with 3 bent nails that stayed there until we moved. Time sanded those edges some. They worked on their marriage. I got older and learned how a house can be louder when folks are trying not to fight. At 12 I made a plan to run away for just one night, punish them with my absence so they would notice me. I packed a sleeve of saltines, a granola bar, my Game Boy, a flashlight with dying batteries. I slipped out at dawn, feeling tall and important in the cold. I went to my oak tree, then wandered because I thought wandering was an adventure. Near noon I heard footsteps deeper in the woods, not from the house side. "Mom!" I yelled, and the steps stopped. Silence gathers heavy in those trees. I found a stream and followed it until the world became different without telling me so. When I finally sat again, she was there, my mother's shape at the tree line, 20 feet off, her blue sweater from that morning, her face held right where branch shadows could keep it. She nodded and beckoned. I apologized as I walked, sorry for being a bad son, sorry for leaving, sorry, and she turned and moved just fast enough to make me hurry. Her arms hung a little too long. She didn't answer when I asked where we were going. She kept to the shadowed side of things like light was a rule she couldn't quite learn. I did what kids do. I ran to catch up without looking down, and the earth dropped out from under me. A ravine opened its mouth, and I rolled into it, all elbows and thorns, landing in a dry creek that hit me like a sentence. Stars swarmed my eyes, not the good kind. When breath came back, it clawed. I tried to climb. Dirt let go of me twice. I cussed for the first time, and it didn't help. I found a spot slick with roots and pulled myself up, then walked in the way lost boys walk, any direction then another. Dusk is a bruise that comes from both sides in those woods. Night fell without a moon. My flashlight died like it had planned it. I sat against a tree and tried being brave until being brave used me up. Sleep took me greedy. I woke on someone's lap. At first, relief. The exact shape of a mother's lap, the way knees cradle you, the way a hand traces your hair. The hand was cold like coins. A nail, no a claw, touched my cheek soft as lint. "Mom," I said, so happy to be done with fear that I'd have believed the night itself if it had put on her voice. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and the face above me wasn't a face. No eyes, no nose, just skin pulled smooth and a mouth too wide, too still, then too smile. It smiled without lips. It bent down like it was learning how to kiss by watching people across the street. I erupted out of that lap like a frog thrown from a bucket. The thing's head tilted. It didn't chase the way animals do. It waited like a woman on a porch, patient, sure you'd come back. The wind dragged itself through dead leaves and sang, "Honey," the way my mother did when she needed me to listen. Not her voice, not exactly, but close enough to tear something in me. "Theo!" My father's voice found me like a rope. He sounded hoarse, running hard horse. I screamed his name until my throat rasped the bark off. Flashlight beams came through the trees like spears. My mother and 2 officers slid down the ravine's safer side to reach me. Dad swore thank yous at God the whole way home. They asked questions at the kitchen table. I told them first about the ravine, then the lap. When I said no eyes, Mom made the sign of the cross and Dad stared at his hands like he was counting his fingers. A volunteer told them, a little too softly for me not to hear, that kids go missing in those hills sometimes, and some are found and some aren't. We moved the next year when Dad got a better job. I didn't walk those woods alone again, but distances are liars. Years later I came back to eastern Kentucky. The app asked me if I was open to meeting up. I said yes, too proud to admit I was more afraid of being alone than of anything in the trees. I told myself stories, I'm grown. That was kid stuff. I can outthink it now. I matched with a woman named Mara who wrote like she'd grown up 3 roads over. "I reckon I know that diner. Y'all ain't from around here, huh?" She had a photo in front of a fire tower I could place from memory. She texted a lullaby line my mama used when I was feverish, the one about mockingbirds and broken promises. "My granny sang it," she wrote. "It made my back teeth ache." "Trailhead date?" she asked. "We'll keep close to the parking lot. I ain't trying to get snake bit on a first hang." I met her on a Sunday afternoon with weather like a knife, clear and thin. Her silhouette in the lot was perfect. The height, the swing of hair, the way a hand rests on a hip. Her face stayed in the hat's brim shadow. We walked the edge of the path. She kept to the shadowed side as if her feet knew the dark better. She asked soft questions and spoke in my mama's rhythms, so precisely I went dizzy. When I stopped, she stopped. When I laughed, she echoed it a beat late, like playback. At the overlook, wind came up out of the hollow like it had something to tell us. "Theo," it croaked, in that creek-sung way I'd tried to forget. "Honey, who taught you that lullaby?" I asked, keeping my voice easy. "Granny," she said. "Same as yours." The answer wore the right clothes, but didn't fit right. Her hands were wrong, a ring finger too long, bendable in a way that made me think of worms. I looked past her shoulder and saw tracks in the dusty red of the path. Prints like a woman's boots, but starting nowhere, no lead up. just appearing in the middle of the trail like someone had set their feet down out of blank air. They went to the lip of the drop and ended. No scuff back. No wait return. Just a sentence without a period. "Let's go back," I said. "Ah." She tilted her head, and for a breath the brim let light catch a cheek that didn't know where cheekbones go. She reached out like to tuck my hair behind my ear, a gesture I'd seen in 1,000 human places, and her palm was cold through the leaf-warm day. "My daddy's meetin' me," I lied. "He'll be here in 5. He talks a blue streak." I thumbed my phone like I was texting. I called my own voicemail to make it ring. A man answered on the first hum in my father's exact voice. "Boy, you stay put." "Not possible." Still, my chest loosened. "Reckon I gotta go," Mara said, except her words turned thin at the edges, like she'd run out of tape. She walked away too smooth, not moving the way stacked bones move, and slid behind a hemlock without coming out the other side. The wind watched me for a second, then changed its mind. I sat on the hood of my truck until my hands knew they were my hands again. Then I drove to my parents' place, and we ate soup beans, and my mother put her palm on my cheek like she was measuring a fever. I told them some of it. Not all. The part one kept was small and mean and true. The lady of the woods doesn't live only in the woods. She lives in our soft spots, the sound of our names said right, the lullabies that belong to us, the moment we mistake silence for safety. I don't walk alone anymore, and I don't answer voices coming from the wrong direction. When the wind sings honey, I go inside. And when a match talks like home too quick, I ask to meet under full sun, in town, with noise enough to drown a mimic. Bonfires were our calendar when I was little, one a month if the weather would let us. Dad would stack split oak in the ring he'd sunk with tractor rims. Uncle Lester would roll up with a cooler full of Budweiser, and that beat-up acoustic with the cigarette burn near the sound hole, and the neighbors would wander over as if the smoke itself wrote invitations. Somebody always brought peach halves and syrup. Somebody always forgot the bug spray. I was allowed to roast 2 marshmallows and run figure eights in the yard till Mom pointed at the kitchen clock. After 9, it turned into adult talk, which meant bigger laughs and words I wasn't supposed to repeat on the school bus. There was one night, the night when the laughter changed. I'd already been marched to bed. My window faced the backyard, so I could watch the fire gutter down to a bed of coals the color of a stovetop. I was almost asleep when I heard feet scrambling, chairs tipping, and the back door bang like a screen slapped in a thunderstorm. Then came breathless laughter, the kind that sounds like you outran a dare. It skittered across the linoleum, and then went quiet except for the ice clacking in a glass. I put my ear to the screen and tried to understand what game grown men play that ends with them sprinting to lock the door. It took me 20-something years to ask. Uncle Lester came over to watch my kids tear into pizza and Sonic the Hedgehog. He stretched out on our couch with his long legs thrown out like campfire pokers, beer sweating on a napkin. The memory came back the way wood smoke sneaks home in your jacket. I said, "You remember that time you and Dad came running in like a bear was wearing your boots?" His eyebrows went up slow, then he started grinning so hard his eyes went wet. "Lord, you was awake for that?" He glanced at my kids to make sure they were busy with the blue hedgehog, then said, "Wasn't no bear. Little feller. 2.5 feet if he stood up straight. Pointy green hat like them old garden statues, only dirtier, with these long ears, lobes stretched like them fellers with the gauges. Nose like a hawk. Madder 'n a rattler in a mailbox." I snorted. "You're pulling my leg. Swear to God, Ted." He even raised his right hand, like he was in court. Came tore out the treeline, cussin' a blue streak in some language I ain't never heard, but my bones knew he was cussin'. Chased us plumb around the pit, and smacked my boot with a stick like I owed him money. We laughed 'cause it was crazy, and we also ran, 'cause we like our ankles where they live. Locked the door and dared each other to peek the blinds. Next morning, not a footprint, not a twig out of place. He took another swallow and added, almost tender, "Your daddy saw the same thing I did. He just didn't say it where you could hear." That should have been where I filed it. Family folklore between the jar of arrowheads and the story about the time a copperhead slept in Aunt Rena's mailbox. But memories have a way of waiting on the porch swing for company. Years later, after a long, lonely stretch, I asked somebody nice over for a backyard first date. Her name was Hallie. She laughed with her whole face, could parallel park a Tacoma like a surgeon, and said "fixin' to" without thinking about it. We decided on simple: grill, music, a little fire if the air stayed still. I scrubbed the grate, sliced those canned peaches into quarters, strung Edison bulbs along the fence like I was auditioning for a home show. Lester loaned me his guitar for atmosphere. "Don't let it wander off," he said, winking. I chalked it up as a joke. Dusk fell the way it does in East Tennessee, soft, with whip-poor wills like someone skipping a stone across the woods. I flipped burgers and tried not to overtalk my own life. Hallie asked about the treehouse on the far side of the yard and how many times I'd fallen out of it. We ate with our knees touching and the Edison bulbs doing their little City of Stars impression. After, we put on a slow song and did that awkward sway that ain't dancing, but it's trying. I thought, in a truly unmanly way, that the moment might keep. Something pinged the rim of the fire pit. Then another. Gravel skittered across the patio and nipped my boot. "Y'all hear that?" I said, half grin, half old superstition. "That ain't no whip-poor will." Hallie angled her head. "Neighbor kids?" Another pebble, this one smarter, caught the toe of her sandal and made a small, sharp sound. From the dark beyond the hedge, a voice rose, quick and tight, like somebody arguing with themselves. It wasn't words I knew, but it had the shape of words. The hair on my arms went up without a skin me first. The guitar, leaning against a chair, thrummed a single string without a hand on it. Then another. Not chords, not music. Like the instrument had remembered a bad tune and wanted to shake it off. The lowy sagged out of tune in a long, slow sigh. I killed the music from the speaker with a thumb. The night rushed back in. The cicadas ratcheted down like they'd been told to hush. The hedge shivered with its own reason. A shape stepped into the low reach of the Edison bulbs, no taller than my grill, hat like a faded party cone hammered to a crown, ears dragging. The nose hooked like it had opinions. Everything about him was the color of wet stump. He looked straight at me, and then at Hallie. The voice came again, and if cuss words had a smell, this would have smelled like creosote and battery acid. "Hey there, little man," I said before my good sense could catch up. He hissed something that could have been mine. His eyes were old and new at the same time, like he'd seen 50 wars and was still mad about the first one. He circled the pit once with fast, eager steps, then darted to my truck. I heard the jingle a beat before I understood. Keys. He held my keys up by the ring, tiny fist triumphant, and bared teeth that looked more like tools than bones. "Okay, nope," Hallie said, which is a sentence that can carry a lot of freight. We backed toward the porch. The little king came trotting up, quicker than his legs ought to allow, and reached for Hallie's hair. She yelped when she felt it catch. In the space of a breath, he twisted a piece of twine into a knot the size of a walnut, fast, sailor fast, and cinched it into her curls. He stepped back to admire his work like he'd hung a painting. "Mine," he said again. This time the word wore a shape I understood. I took one step forward, hands up. "Now hey, she ain't." He stamped, tiny boots scuffing a crescent in the dust. He jabbed the twine knot with his little stick, eyes bright with the mean glee of a kid who learned fire yesterday. The guitar behind us slipped another string flat by itself, a loose, ugly moo. "Inside," I said to Hallie low. "Go." The gnome. Gnome is what my mouth said because my head needed a word, shifted quick and cut us off as clean as a dog at a sheep gate. He scuttled to the cooler and smacked his palm on the lid. Child-sized Prince fanned the condensation when he lifted it, and he plunged that hook nose into the ice like a king sampling tribute. He came up with one of those peach quarters between thumb and forefinger, took a neat bite, and left a crescent that looked like it had been cut with tin snips. He tossed my truck keys underhand, and they clipped the porch step. The way he grinned at me said that mercy was his to give, not mine to receive. "Hallie," I said, and I heard my dad's voice in mine, steady like a truck idling. "We're moving. Together. You on me." We went like a three-legged race, my arm around her shoulders, her hand at my belt. The gnome zipped along the hedge line and popped out in front again, chattering, furious and delighted. "Y'all hear that?" I said, because sometimes words are handles. "That ain't no whip-poor will." I put the grill between him and us. He didn't like the heat. He hissed at it, eyes narrowing. We slid past, shoes loud on concrete. At the door, the knob gave me that old nightmare slip, slick as if it had been greased. My heart did a stupid deer thing. Then the latch caught. We fell into the kitchen, and I slammed the deadbolt with the kind of force a man reserves for things that bite. Through the glass I could see him pacing the patio like a little warlord, hat askew, ears twitching. He rapped the stick 3 times on the step, tick, 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 and the sound went down my spine like a zipper. He stayed there a long minute, considering the door as if calculating ownership. Then he faded back into the hedge with that quick, ant-like hustle, as if the dark had thrown a lasso and reeled him home. Inside, we stood in the pool of light like folks who had just outrun a weather system. Hallie's laugh came late and high and broke, and then she was crying and then not. I got the twine out of her hair with scissors, and the kind of care I wish I'd learned years before. On the counter, the peach with the bite looked obscene. "Your uncle ever say what he wanted?" she asked, voice shaking and trying to be brave about it. "Territory," I said. "Or attention. Or to be the only story told around a fire." "Little King," she said. "Yeah." I looked at Lester's guitar. It sat there, loose and offended. I tuned the strings back up one by one, and put it in the closet like a cat you carry away from the sink. We finished our date at the kitchen table under a bright light, hands around mugs of tea neither of us drank. We took turns telling small, true things, sisters' names, favorite roadside stands, how we like our eggs, so the room would remember us. When I walked her to her truck later, the yard smelled like cut grass, not like creosote. The hedge was just a hedge. I grew up in Morganton, where Brown Mountain is less a view than a neighbor, always sitting there after supper, blue and blunt, like it could lean across the Catawba and tap your window. Folks tell the story 100 ways. Civil War widowers, Catawba hunters, bootleggers with blown lamps. "Ain't ghosts," my dad would say, squinting toward NC 181. "Ain't science neither. They're lights that mind their own till you don't." He kept a cracked Polaroid in his toolbox, pinpricks over the ridge like cigarette cherries. When I was little, we'd stop at the overlook, and he'd let me stand on the stone wall and pretend I could pluck one. The first time we saw them proper, we weren't even trying. It was late October at a campground near Mortimer, fire down to orange bones, radio yapping out a football game with more static than play. Somewhere past 9 the crickets thinned, and the radio hiss grew teeth. 2 lights rose from the gorge like someone lit match heads underwater and let them bob up slow. They wandered the slope, and then, this part is what made my dad go quiet. One split in 2 like a soap bubble dividing. He put his hand on my shoulder, gentle and iron. "Stay put, Nora," he said, like I'd been about to run toward them. The air smelled like a box fan with dust in it. The lights skirted the edge of camp, never touching the trees, as if the trees were rules. Then life did that thing where it opens your hand and replaces moss and creek with invoices and keystrokes. I left for college, then Raleigh, then back to Burke County because somehow my bones still pointed west. My friends married, or tried to. I downloaded an app and told it I was open to possibilities, which is what you say when you don't want to admit you mean lonely. Caleb messaged first. He was a lineman, Duke Energy, not the kind that runs routes, and he had wrist scars from climbing hooks and the kind of calm that people who have stood under fallen lines carry like a second shirt. "I got a decent thermos," he wrote. "We could go look for the lights. New moon this week." We picked the Brown Mountain overlook up 181, the one with the WPA stone and the little map caked with thumb grease. The road hammered us like a washboard, and Caleb whistled, wagon wheel, under his breath the way you do when nerves need something to chew. We set the thermos on the wall and sipped something too sweet, legs dangling into a dark so complete it felt like lake water. The sky was hemorrhaging stars. "If we see nothing," he said, "we still saw this." I nodded and let the quiet do the rest. They came in shy at first, a pair, then a third lower, like lanterns carried by careful hands. I reached for my phone without thinking, and the screen's glow made the night cough. The lights stalled, then swelled, hazed, and bit down smaller, as if they didn't like being named. Caleb put his hand over my camera. "Don't be rude," he said, smiling. He had one of those soft Appalachian smiles, crooked, apologetic, stubborn as a creek rock. A tone chirped. Not my tone. The old Nokia trill, the one from my first phone. I felt it in my ribs before I heard it with my ears. Another tone answered from the tree line, slightly wrong, like somebody whistling with a chipped tooth. The lights bobbed, then aligned, 3 across, and pulsed in time with that ancient ringtone. "Ha!" Caleb said, and gripped the wall like maybe it could grip him back. The hair on my forearm stood up as tidy as a wheat field. "Y'all seeing that?" A voice called from the parking area. It sounded like a man you'd trust with a stump puller. We turned. There was nobody at the trucks. The voice came again, closer, friendlier. "Hey, honey." My father's voice, softened with smoke and Saturdays. It slid down the rock, lay around my shoulders, fit perfect. I almost said Daddy, and that almost scared me worse than the dark. "Lights do that," Caleb said, keeping his eyes on the ridge. "Radio bleed. Ionization. His rational words didn't know what to do with his fingers, which were white on the stone. The lights moved casual like gossip. One drifted low and sat on the far side of the wall, not 10 feet from my knees. I could see the rock through it, a smudged marble, except at the core, where something glowed like a coal fanned by breath. The air around it hummed the way air does right before a transformer pops. Caleb leaned over the wall, just a touch, the way a man leans toward a baby to check if it's sleeping. "Don't," I said. "Just want a better look," he whispered and put his palm above it, not touching. The light rose slow. It met his hand like a moth meeting glass. He flinched. "Hot," he said, puzzled, not hurt, like surprise wanted to try on his mouth. A second light slid up beside the first, as if drawn by that sound. It pulsed once, twice. On the third pulse, both flared bright enough to cast shadows of us back against the old stone. Behind us, the truck chirped. The locks thunk down, then up, then down again. The hazard lights stuttered a pattern I recognized from the ring I'd set on my phone for my mother's texts. Long, short, short. The lights answered with pulses. It would have been beautiful if it hadn't been aimed like a question. "You got your keys?" I asked. "In my pocket." He patted, then frowned. The keys were on the wall where his hand had been, laid neat. I hadn't seen him put them down. I hadn't seen him take them out. From the dark to our left, another light rose, this one with a color I hadn't seen in any campfire, green tucked under white like a bruise healing backward. It hovered at shoulder height, then sidled between us, crisp as a person cutting into a slow dance. Jealousy is a tight word, it fit. "Okay," I said in my best customer service voice, the one that can talk to a down line and make it consider us harmless. "We're fixin' to go." "Don't run," Caleb said too fast. "They like movement." I didn't ask how he knew. Some knowing you don't own. It rents space in your marrow. We backed toward the truck, the lights drifting with us the way minnows drift with your ankles. When I clicked the fob, the hazard lights flashed hard and the closest light hiccuped. It dimmed, then bolted sideways along the wall like a spark looking for kindling. I clicked again on purpose. The little green under white one flared, then lifted, irritated, as if what we'd done made it lose count. We slid into the cab. The dome light made the night press its nose to the glass. Caleb turned the key. The alternator whined its thin electric whine, and the lights closest shivered like puppies in bathwater. The engine caught. Headlights threw the overlook into ugly noon. The lights didn't vanish, they deflated, as if some unseen hand had opened their seams. One darted up like a balloon cut loose, one sank, and one hung at eye level, pulsing fast like a heart in a jar. "Sorry," I said without knowing to whom, and put us in gear. We rolled out slow, not because I'm brave, but because you don't want to teach a thing like that you can be chased. In the rear view, the three lights bobbed once more, then broke pattern. One streaked the parking lot at hood height and kissed the tailgate. The smell of hot metal filled the cab. Caleb swore, soft as prayer. At the first turnout, we stopped. On the tailgate, there was a perfect circle singed into the dust where the Ford logo sits, the black scorched clean like an idea burned into a page. On my ring finger, under my mother's little sapphire, the gold was warm enough to make me feel it. Not burn. A reminder.